Hello and welcome to the Boomstick Gaming review for Remnant from the Ashes. Does this dynamically generated RPG shooter provide you with infinite enjoyable campaigns to surmount, or does it all amount to finite fun? Remnant from the Ashes is a challenging action RPG that can be tackled entirely alone or with a few teammates online. The core gameplay loop is all about regular shootouts, a whole lot of dodging, upgrading your gear, and effectively conserving ammo where you can, while trying to survive from bonfire to checkpoint to checkpoint. The guns in the game start out quite basic, but do eventually get to the point of ludicrous later on. This is not what you would call a looter shooter, however, and you will not be showered in gear by any stretch of the imagination, but cool weapons definitely exist when you manage to find them. I honestly might have had some horrible luck in my first playthrough in this regard, and ended up using my starting gun and armor for over half of the entire game since I just didn't flat out come across that much gear. Once I finally made it over that initial hump, I really started to enjoy everything much more when the unique weapons started making an appearance. It seems like the game is definitely skewed for multiple playthroughs with its loot tables, which gives you something to strive for in the long run, but it's hard to say it works out when multiple hours melt by with little to shake up the gunplay. Although a large element of chance is involved with what weapons and gear populate in your world's layout, the boss items that can be crafted with their associated materials are often your most reliable method for improving your arsenal. There are 3 available classes in the game that all offer slight differences in their starting gear, weapon mod, and one specific trait card, but don't fret over which one is the right one for you, because you can easily buy or obtain what the other classes offer, making them feel not vitally important. There is also a fairly basic character creator that offers you the standard variety of face presets, hair options, visual blemishes, and a few voice options, but since your character barely speaks, these really only make changes to your mid-battle banter. Once you have everything locked into place and you're as beautiful or as hideous as you desire, it's now time to roll your very own adventure that will be different from everyone else's. Remnant's claim to fame and what sets it apart from other RPG shooters out there is its use of dynamic generation to allow each campaign to be, I wouldn't say completely different, but somewhat different each time through. This means that item placement, environment layouts, bosses, and even a few elements of progression differ from playthrough to playthrough. Although on paper this sounds pretty great, in practice it amounts to somewhat hit and miss results. One of the first things I noticed that was different in my second playthrough, for example, was that the first boss was entirely different, but still just a powered up version of an enemy type that I fought over 100 times already, and the second boss I got to was actually the exact same. Also, I did notice some different standard enemies here and there during my travels, although the vast majority were the same old enemies over and over, or just reskin variants with roughly the same attack patterns. It's maybe not earth-shattering, but it is enjoyable when you do come across a new enemy type or piece of gear that you never saw in your previous campaign, and these elements do sometimes create some memorable micro moments from use of this dynamic generation that Gunfire Games has come up with. If you really enjoy the core gameplay loop in Remnant, there is tons of content on offer with higher difficulty modes that allow you to continually boost your character and amass even more powerful gear, which is something to consider for the game's overall value proposition. Will you enjoy the game enough to play it more than once? Hard to say, but it does go out of its way to make it as alluring as possible. The weapon mods in Remnant function more akin to an ultimate ability, allowing for the largest room of flexibility with your overall build. These can be socketed onto basic guns to do things like spawn projectile firing skulls, place healing fountains, summon tentacle traps, and many other fairly unique abilities. The other half of your arsenal are special weapons that have predetermined mods on them that cannot be changed, which makes these typically the most interesting weapons in the game. These mods recharge fairly quickly by killing enemies, and with one on each of your 2 guns, all go to add a little spice into the stop and go shooting. Along your travels, you'll be gathering and crafting these mods, along with upgrading all of your gear with a basic crafting system, and allocating points into your ever-expanding skill tree, which accumulates different trait card bonuses the further you progress. played a pretty hefty amount of Remnant completely solo and with a few friends, but now is the very important part where we talk about the game's balance. Almost every boss fight I encountered has your traditional big bad enemy that should be plenty challenging on its own, but most all of these rely on waves of additional grunt enemies to bloat the difficulty. This makes sense when playing with a team to help even out the action, but a notice to all potential solo players out there, just be prepared to have to bash your head against a wall over and over with many of these boss fights. Most did not feel properly balanced for solo play, especially coupled with trying to manage your stamina, getting your guns reloaded, healing, and not running out of ammo, all while micromanaging up to 10 enemies and a boss all at once. I do understand that they did this to provide you with some ammo drops during these fights, but still it feels somewhat off. Although I did have plenty moments of joy when playing by myself, I equally had just as many moments of frustration where I felt like I had to overcome not a hard but fair boss fight, but game design itself. I would highly recommend you go into Remnant as a pure co-op shooter, and if you're interested in going solo, it's definitely possible, but just know what you're getting yourself into. Doing many of these battles with partners at your side makes for a world of difference, with not only them being able to attract aggro away from you, but also just the simple fact that you can get revived by teammates if they sacrifice one of their healing charges. This made many of these encounters feel exhilarating to take on as a team, while adversely feeling artificially difficult when playing alone. Remnant from the Ashes ultimately goes for a near infinite amount of good RPG shooter campaigns instead of opting for one really great structured campaign. Which would have been a better approach? Well, it's really left up to your personal preference in the end because both have their pros and cons. If you have a few buddies who will join in to play this with you, definitely go for it because it's a satisfyingly difficult game to tackle in co-op, and for solo players, just be prepared for the odds to be severely stacked against you. In the end, I enjoyed Remnant from the Ashes thanks to the responsiveness to its core gameplay, coupled with the variety in the weapon mod system, and although it might throw game balance purposely out the window, this is also what might make it the most rewarding for you and your friends to try and overcome. And those are my thoughts on Remnant from the Ashes, and I actually want to try out something I never have before in a review, because I always wished I could just hand you the controller for a minute to let you get a feel for the game, since I consider gameplay to be the most important element to gaming, so let's try something out. I want to just take a moment with the raw controls to try to translate how the game plays at its core, to hopefully give you a little taste of how it actually feels to play, without getting hands-on yourself. The shooting mechanics feel surprisingly responsive and are easier to aim with a controller than you might expect, with keyboard and mouse being as snappy as you would hope. You have your go-to method of evasion with a standard dodge roll, and also a backstep which can be done to duck under some attacks. The running slide and crouch also feel great, which I ended up using quite regularly. It's really easy to swap back and forth between your two guns mid-fight, and just as easy to toggle on your weapon's mod ability. You also have a melee attack that differs from weapon to weapon, and you can hold down the button to alter its attack animation. Using items is pretty seamless, but most do have a fairly long consume animation. Overall, Remnant feels really solid to play, and it's not the style of game where you're constantly battling the controls themselves, which I will always greatly appreciate. So did this little demonstration at the end provide you with a little better feel of the game, or is it still mostly lost in video translation? Let me know. If you happen to enjoy my review style or feel I've helped you make a more informed purchasing decision at any time, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, ring that little bell icon if you already are, and follow me on Twitter at BoomstickAlex. Also, if you want to go above and beyond, definitely check out the perks I provide to my YouTube members and patrons who greatly help to improve my channel, just like these awesome top supporters do every month. If you have any lingering questions about Remnant from the Ashes, just shoot them to me in the comments and I'll try to get back with you on it. And as always, this has been Alex from Boomstick Gaming, and I appreciate you watching this all the way to the end. Thank you.